Hi, everyone. I'm Paul with MadCap Software. Welcome to our last movie in our video series on source control. In this video, I'm just going to go over a bunch of tips, tricks, and best practices, just a variety of things that you can do to help make the source control process much better, much more streamlined and just less painful. All right. So this video is broken up into little segments with each thing I'm going to talk about. You can actually go down into the play bar, hover over that and see the names of the different chapters and skip ahead to something if you want to, or you can just sit tight, watch the whole thing. So let's get started. So I grew up with 5 brothers, 2 sisters, and my dad used to take us all fishing, line us up at the edge of this pond. We all had our fishing poles, and before long, everything was tangled. All of our lines were tangled. And the longer his back was turned, the longer he was away, the worse it was. That's kind of how source control is. And that the longer you let things go, the greater the chances are that there's going to be a tangled mess. So maybe the best advice I have for people using source control is to do things frequently, with Git, which is what I've largely been showing in this series. You're doing commits and you're doing synchronization, and with these other providers, you're doing gets and you're checking things in, but it's all kind of the same. You're synchronizing things. And so you want to do this relatively frequently. The more time that goes by, the worse things can get. And you forget things too. I can't remember what I had for dinner last night. So if someone were to come up to me and say, hey, I just got some conflicts, and what'd you do in this file? And if I said, well, that was 3 weeks ago, I think around then, I'm not exactly sure what I did. It's harder to untangle the lines. But if it happened earlier in the day, you go, oh yeah, it was that thing. And it's much less likely to happen as the less time that you let go by. So you don't necessarily need to be synchronizing files and merging branches and doing all of these things every couple of minutes. You don't have to necessarily do that, but you definitely should, at the beginning of the day, start out with nothing you don't have anything that is left from the night before. So at the end of the day, you want to make sure that things are synchronized. And during the day, you are synchronizing. I probably will normally do, an hour or two, maybe sometimes less, maybe a little bit more, but on average around then when I'm doing commit and synchronization. So you can help yourself and your team a lot if you just are disciplined and making sure that you're doing things frequently. Now, as I've been doing different things in this video series, you've seen me going in to make commits, and I'll add comments to those things. And with the other providers, they also have a comment system, whatever you're doing when you're checking in files. Okay, so a lot of the commits that I did were just, really, really simple, just to move things along and to get these things done. But in the real world, I would really encourage you to try to make your comments as descriptive as possible. You never know when you're going to need to go back into your branch history, your history for something, or the file history, and see when you did a particular thing. So let me just go into Flare and show you a little bit about what I'm talking about. So in this little project that I've been using in the last few videos, branching demo, I am going to click on the branch history. I have this feature 3 branch that I've been working on, and I'm going to look at the history. So this is what the commit history looks like for this branch for feature 3. And you can see the last column are all the comments. And if you've been following along over the last few videos, you'll recognize some of these comments that I put in here, just very, very simple things. And then sometimes I would do a commit, and if I didn't put in any comment, it's just going to fill this with what files were affected. And here you can see all these HTML files. So it is better to add a comment so that you're not just getting this, all this long list of stuff, a whole bunch of files like in this one. But the thing is, you don't want to just put anything. You don't want to put something too generic. I'm as guilty as anybody is of getting lazy and putting in something like, miscellaneous edits or something like that. But if you really wanted to go back and find where you did a particular set of edits, it's much easier if your comments are more descriptive. For example, I'm going to open up this topic. I just went in here and I added this note down here. It says, this information applies only to Europe. This is the only change that I've made in this, and I want to commit this. And you just have to use your best judgment on what you're going to put in the comment. Now, I've mentioned this before, that my project is broken up into sections on the various MadCap software products, so Flare, Capture, Central, Lingo, so on. And I like to, I will start by, putting the name of the product and then a dash and then, whatever my comment is. And that helps me at least see, first of all, what product this change had to do with. But otherwise, if you might have your own organization, and so you can do that same sort of thing. But in this one, let's just look at this note. This information applies only to Europe. Okay, so if I were just writing a comment about this, rather than just saying, made some changes, well, if you look in the history, that could be anything. So it would probably be a lot more useful if I put added note on Europe only. Oh, I can't even spell. Yeah, at least that gives you a hint. You don't have to be really verbose and write a bunch of text, but something that's going to let you look at the history and see, oh yeah, that's when I did that one thing. So then you just commit that, and I'll go ahead and sync it as well. And when I pull up the branch history again, it's going to say that in the comment field. So try to make your comments descriptive. We're all busy. I know you're busy, but you're doing it for you, and you're doing it for your team. Another thing that you can do is make sure that when you are editing your project and you're bound to source control, is that you edit in logical chunks. So rather than just going, oh, I'm going to make these changes over here and then this thing, which is completely unrelated, it helps if you just focus in on one particular thing. For example, when I was writing about micro content, did a tutorial. And so I don't know how many lessons there are in that. Let's say there are 8. Maybe I'm writing and I get through the first 2 lessons and I go, oh, that's a good stopping point. And then I'll stop and then do my source control tasks. I will commit my changes and I will synchronize. And that's really good for a couple of reasons. One, it helps with the comment, which I just talked about, helping it to be more descriptive. I can just focus in on making the comment about those 2 lessons about micro content, rather than I did that and then I did this other thing over here, and oh yeah, I did this thing, and make the comment really drawn out. It also helps with the first thing, with the other thing I talked about, which is frequency. So if you stop at natural places, natural stopping points, when you're editing, you go, okay, that's a good place to stop. You do a sync. All right. And so you just find yourself naturally synchronizing your changes in certain points throughout the day, rather than waiting till the end of the day and, oh, here's a whole bunch of crud that I'm going to now synchronize, and it's all just lumped together. So I find that that really helps to edit in logical chunks. You've seen throughout this video series me do a lot of the different tasks for source control with just regular everyday things that you do, and some more obscure tasks, and a lot of stuff with branching. But there are some options that you can set that can also help things along. So let's go into Flare, and I'm going to take a look at the options dialog and also the target editor, because there are just different things that you might choose to enable or disable, depending on what you want to do and what works best in your situation. So in Flare, if you go into the File menu and you go select Options, you're going to get the Options dialog, and it's got all of these tabs over here. So if you go to Source Control, you're going to see lots of things in here. And you might decide that you want to, use some of these. Let's just kind of work our way down. Now, this first one and the thing under it, these really have to do with Perforce, Helix Core, or Team Foundation Server, because those are the providers where you have this idea of checking files out. So if you want to automatically check a file out from source control when saving file changes, you can select that. So it just saves you a step in there. It's just you save, and it's just going to check it out. And then you also have the option to lock files when they're checked out, and it just does this automatically. So if I were using Perforce or TFS, I might do both of these because it just does it automatically, whereas you have to remember to do it manually. Let's move on to the next one. Show prompt to add auto-created files to source control. So there are some circumstances where certain files will get added automatically to your project when you do certain things. So an example is, let's say you wanted to import some Word documents, and you drag the Word documents from Windows Explorer into your Flare project, and you go through the wizard to import these things. Well, these files, these Word files, will be turned into topic files. So those will be added. And then you might have a variety of other things that are added as well, depending on your settings. You might get a new template page. You're going to get an import file. So you get these things in here. So you can select this if you want to be prompted to add those auto-created files to source control. Now, you may not need to use this, because when you bring them in, you're eventually going to be synchronizing, and you will add them. It's just it's a prompt to do it. So I actually don't have this selected. I'm not really adding a lot of files like that anyway, things that get auto-created, but you might decide to use this. You could enable this and try it out and see if you find it useful, or maybe you disable it if you don't find it useful. Okay, so this next thing, enable background status checks. What this does is it will ping your repository, however often you say, 5 minutes, 1 minute, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, how many seconds. And so it will just check on that to make sure that the thing is up to date. Now, this is another thing that I don't select. One of the things about this is it can help you stay more up to date, but it also can slow down the performance of your project. So I don't really use that one, but you might find a use for it. Now, the next one, this can be really, really useful. You have heard me preach throughout this series about first thing you do when you open up your project is do a poll. And other providers will use different terminology. You can see this says, do not prompt to get latest. So this terminology is get latest, but for Git, it would be a poll. So it depends on the provider, but it's this checkbox is doing the same thing for any of these providers. You're retrieving the latest changes from the remote when you've got a source bound project. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave it deselected in here just to show you. And I'm going to click OK. I already have my project open in here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close it, close the project. All right. So when you first come in and you go, okay, I'm ready to start working on my project for the day, I'm going to open mine right here, branching demo, and this is what happens. It goes, oh, do you want to pull the latest stuff from the repository, from the remote, and update the files? You go, yeah, why wouldn't I? That's the best practice. That's what I should do. So you say yes. It opens this up. Now, again, this is bound to central, so this is Git, but if you're using a different provider, it would use whatever, whatever the UI is for that. And then it's telling me, hey, everything's up to date. Okay, cool. If things weren't up to date, it would grab that other stuff. So maybe another writer on the team is starting earlier in the day, and I'm starting an hour later. And so if I use this, maybe that person has already pushed some things up there and I'm just immediately getting that stuff. Now notice that in this case, I have my feature 3 branch. I'm using branching here. So I've got all these branches and I have feature 3 is the one that's active. So when I did this, it's just pulling things down for that branch. If that other person had made changes to the feature 2 branch or one of these others, I would need to do a pull later. So that's a best practice also, is when you switch to a different branch, just immediately do a pull. Okay. But this is a really nice little option because it's just going to get your day started when you open up the project new, or when you open up the project again. Let's go back into the options dialog. Now the next one says, prompt the check-in files when closing source control bound projects. So let's say that I don't have this thing selected. I'm going to deselect it and click OK. And let me go into a topic in here. And I'm just going to open up this what's new. I'm going to just type some stuff under this. Some stuff. Literally, I'm typing some stuff. And I save it. And you can see I have a pending change down here. I really need to commit that and synchronize. But maybe I'm just kind of get distracted, and then I think, oh, I'm going to go work on this other project or do something else, and I close my project like this, and it closes it. Okay, and then I go on, and maybe I'm done for the day, but I have this thing that I haven't dealt with. And it's best to never to always stop working and have everything checked in or pushed, synchronized that you need when you're done for the day, or when you're done working for that project for the day. So I'm going to open this back up. And so you see it's asking me if I want to update again. That's the previous thing, and it actually is telling me. Commit required to pull. Do you want to commit now? And so I'm just going to go ahead and go through this and say yes. Added some stuff. That's really what I did. So I'm going to go through this. So there's a nice reminder there that says, hey, I'll do this. I'm going to pull things down for you, but you really need to deal with this change. Okay. Now, let's go back into options, and this time I'll select it, okay? And let's go back, and I'm going to add even more stuff. Okay, and I save it. And I've got my pending change there. And if I go, oh, I think I'm done, I'm going to close out of this project. It reminds me right there is like, hold on, Sparky, you got unfinished business here. So I'm going to go, oh yeah, I added even more stuff, and take care of this. I'm going to make sure that I finish with my project is clean and up to date as possible. All right. And so I committed that. What it does is it committed it. It didn't sync it though. Notice that it closed out of the project, but I could go back in if I thought, oh, but I want to sync this thing. And I have that reminder once again when I open it up. So that's pulling these changes from the remote, and it says it's up to date. But I'm back in here now, and now I can go and I can sync that pending change. So at least it's a reminder, both of these last couple of things are reminders. One's kind of at the beginning and one's at the end, just to let you know, hey, you want to make sure that things are cleaned up here. Okay, let's go back into the options dialog. Go to the next thing. And this says enforce TFS comment policy. So obviously this is limited to Team Foundation server. And so there are certain policies that you can follow for TFS. And one of them is a comment policy, so that it forces you to add a comment when you're checking things in. And so if your team decides, yeah, we definitely want to do that, we want to make sure everybody adds a comment, you can enable that. I'm bound to Central, so I'm not even using TFS, so this wouldn't apply to me, but that's what that's for. This thing down here, bind detection, this is just let's Flare go and look and see if you had previously already had a binding to something. And it will, allow you to connect to that. So since the time I first recorded this video, the UI has changed, and I want to take you through these next options on bind detection. So this area right here, bind detection, what this does is if you have it selected, Flare is going to scan to see if you already have a binding to previous binding to source control. All right. Now, most people aren't going to need to worry about this at all. You bind within Flare to source control, it's going to turn this thing on, and it just recognizes the binding, and you just never know about it. For 3 of the providers, this is off by default. For Git, it is on by default. And so, yeah, for most people, you just don't need to worry about it. But why would you want to deselect this? Well, if you just don't want Flare recognizing the binding, you are working outside of Flare with another tool. So maybe you've even bound outside. You first did your binding outside of Flare, and you are using something else to perform all your source control tasks, and you don't even want to see the UI, or you don't want Flare to recognize the binding. For example, the pending changes window in the Source Control Explorer, that's going to populate as you make changes because Flare is recognizing that binding, even if you're using another tool to actually commit things. Well, that's not hurting anything. Flare's just recognizing it and letting you know, hey, I see what's going on. But some people just don't want that, and they don't even want to see that. Here's what you can do. First of all, let me tell you, outside of the options dialog, you can go into either Source Control Explorer settings, or you can go into the project properties. I'll just show you here in Source Control Explorer. You've got this enabled button for this provider, and you could deselect this. And what that's going to do is it is going to hide the source control ribbon. It's going to hide the Source Control Explorer and the other UI parts. So you don't even see it. Now, this would do it per project. If you want to do it for a whole bunch of projects, you've got a whole bunch and you don't want to go into each one and do that, well, for Git, I'm not talking about the other 3, but if you are doing Git, you can deselect this, and it's going to deselect those providers, turn that stuff off for you. So that is what bind detection. I'm going to go through these things because this is stuff that I covered early on when when we talked about binding earlier in this video series. But yeah, just kind of look through these options in here. You might find that some of these are really going to help you out as you're working in source control. Okay, so one other thing I want to show you has to do with the target editor. So if I come in here, I'm going to open up this HTML5 target. You're going to notice something on the general tab down here. This says automatically get latest version of all files before generating the target. So maybe another writer has synchronized and you just haven't done a pull yet and you're ready to build some output. Well, this just automatically is going to get those things so that you don't even have to kind of tell your brain, oh, before I build, I should go do a pull. So let's actually work through this. I am going to go to this other writer, this second writer. Okay, so let's say that this second writer, I'm just going to come in here under getting started and type hi there. Okay, just so we have some content. He is in this feature 3 branch and is going to commit this added hi there text. Okay, going to commit this and sync it. So that change is up there on the remote location in the remote repository as soon as this thing finishes here. There it goes. So go back to my project. And if I were to open up that same topic in here, you're not going to see that text at all. And I decide, oh, I'm gonna build some output. Well, I can select that. If I were to just build, it wouldn't have that hi there text at all. But because I selected that and now I build, it's going through this process where it's going to get those changes first of all, and then it kicks off my build. So that can be really nice. Just kind of, saves you the hassle of trying to remember it yourself to get it. And if I open up the output, I go to that topic, you can see it automatically added it. So that can be a really nice little option as well. So those are just some custom source control options. You have it's your choice whether you want to enable these things or not. Just go through them, figure out what you think is useful and do it. In a previous video, I went over the conflicts that you can get when working with source control. And one of these had to do with conflicts that happen in TOC files. And we saw how, all right, when you get that conflict, you can take additions from both writers and kind of merge those together into the TOC file. But there is something else that you can do to really help avoid conflicts altogether or to a great extent. So let's go into Flare. I'm going to show you how you can actually have separate TOCs and link them together. So in my project, I have this TOC, it's called Online, and you can see all of these links I have to the different topics. And a couple of these are on feature 1 and feature 3 topics that I have folders and topics for over here in the Content Explorer. And then at the beginning, I've got this getting started stuff, a few topics there, and then these things at the end, FAQs, tips, company topic. Actually, I can probably get rid of that one. That's a remnant from an earlier video. Just going to delete that. But you have all these things in here, okay? And maybe you've got one writer who's really working on feature 1 and another writer who's working on feature 3. Well, if you have one TOC like this where everything is in here together, the writers could be making changes at the same time to the TOC, to their different parts. And when somebody syncs then they'll get this conflict and they have to deal with it. Well, another option that you have is to split these up into separate TOCs. So maybe you want this main stuff right here to be in, let's just call this the main TOC, the online one. And you want this stuff to be in the main TOC. You want these things to be in the main TOC, but maybe split these out into separate TOCs. So I've actually taken the liberty of doing that. So if I open up feature one topics, that TOC, you can see it's just got that book linked to a topic and these links to topics down here. And then feature three is the same thing, just for feature three. Okay, so that way authors, the feature one author can be working in this TOC, and the feature three author can be working in this one. So then what happens to the main TOC? Well, instead of having these things directly in here, you can provide links to them. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to delete that. And I am going to add a new item. You just click this button right here. It's going to add it there. And I can just type in here, feature one topics, press enter. And it's not where I want it yet. I'm just going to use these arrows to move it over. It's got the flag there, which means it's not linked to anything yet. That's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the properties to this, right click, properties. And if I go into the general tab and choose select TOC, let me reduce the size of this first, select TOC, it opens this up and it finds all the TOCs in my project. I can go, yeah, let's link it to that feature one TOC, okay? And I'll come back in here because I'm going to show you something else later. But for now, let's just click OK. And now let's add another one down here. I'm going to move it over, call this feature two topics or three topics. Those are the two things that I've got in here. Same thing, open up your properties for this, select the TOC, and we'll link to that other TOC, the separate one. So now, the only time that you need to edit this TOC is if you're editing this, if you're making changes to this general stuff at the beginning or this stuff at the end. But otherwise, this is probably where most of your work is happening in these other places, which are these separate TOCs. Okay, so let's go ahead and build the output for this and take a look at how it looks in the output. So it should just take a moment here, very small project. What you're going to see is that it just kind of merges it together and the end user can't even tell that these are separate TOCs. But we are going to make another refinement to it. So in here, this is, so this output is side navigation output. So the TOC gets translated into this side menu. So there's our introductory stuff. There's the stuff at the end. And it just linked in this TOC. Now, if I click that, you get another thing down here, feature one topics. It's like it's duplicated. Then you open that up. That is that topic that's linked there. And then these are the individual topics underneath it, right? And then same thing with feature three. All right, you got those. Now, I already know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, I don't want this repeated in here. That's the other thing I want to show you is this. You go back in here. The extra step that you can do is go into the advanced tab and select this. When merging, replace the node with the merged TOC, because what I had done was I just added an item and it wasn't linked to a topic. I ended up linking it to the TOC, but I'm telling it now, I don't want this thing to duplicate. I just want it to plop in the first thing that's in that TOC. So now if I rebuild, it should fix that. So what's happening is multiple authors are working in their own TOCs and they're not stepping on one another unless they happen to for some reason, edit in that same TOC, or if they both come in here and edit in the main TOC. So now that I open up this fixed version, if I click on that, now that extra thing is gone. That's probably what you want right there. So yeah, don't have to do this. You can keep everything in one TOC and just deal with the conflicts. But if the conflicts really bother you and you just kind of want to assign people to different things, this is one way to do it. Something else that's a really good thing to do when you have a team of writers is limit which people are allowed to work on which files. And that's another thing that's going to help reduce the conflicts that come in. Let's actually look at the different files in Flare. So maybe you tell certain people not to touch certain topics, or maybe they can, edit any topics, but perhaps you have certain introductory topics or reference topics, and there's just no need for, say, junior writers to be editing those. And you say, just stay out of those. Work in, whatever feature you're working on, and your snippets and your images and, all of that. If we go into the resources folder, you can see, all right, so images, probably most authors need to deal with images, and maybe most authors need to be involved with the micro content, but maybe, so page layouts is something that you don't put together all that often, and maybe you want to limit that and say, hey, this person is going to be creating these page layouts. So you don't have to have, too many cooks in the kitchen. Style sheet, an experienced person, probably you want to be editing the style sheet. You maybe don't want somebody who's new going in there. At least not at first. And anyway, it's sometimes a good idea to just limit that anyway, even if you have multiple experienced people, so that just one or two people maybe are responsible for what the edits that are made there and in the table style sheets. And then the template pages, that's another thing that's just done every once in a while. So maybe not everybody needs to be working on those. Then in the project organizer, you might decide, hey, this is where we can really limit it. Somebody who's new, there's no need for them really to be maybe changing any of these things or adding any of these things. A lot of this is stuff that you don't do that often anyway, so you're not as likely to hit conflicts. But by just making decisions on your team about who can edit and change and add what, that can go a long way to help making this a lot better process for you. Now, there isn't any way to just, some technical option to lock this down and say this person can't get in here. They actually could. There isn't any roles-based thing that says this person has this role and they have these permissions to come in here. No, somebody could come in here and edit any of this stuff. But I think that it's probably, for most teams, it's good enough to just let people know. Just communicate with them and say, don't do these things, and it doesn't happen. Maybe someday there will be an option to lock down certain files, but for right now, it's really just communicating with your team, hey, don't do these things, don't edit these files. Now, one of the things that I have mentioned earlier in this series, but it's something I want to touch on again and show you a little bit of, is to organize. If you're using branching, if you're naming new branches, do it in a way where you organize them. It's going to make, if you end up with a whole lot of branches, it's going to make it much easier to locate them and deal with them. In this project, if I go in here and look at the branches, I only have a handful in here, so it's not such a big deal, but you can imagine if you've got dozens of branches in here. So I've said that what I do before, I'm actually going to select the release branch, because I like to create my feature branches based on the release branch, create a new branch. And so what I do, for example, I've mentioned, like I organize by products. So Lingo is one of our products, and then I'll do a slash and I'll say term-based, because that's the feature that I want to write about. And so I'll do it that way. In our case, let's just say, and it doesn't have to be by product. I mean, that's just what I do, but you could organize in any way that you want. Just think of it like creating folders. So let's just say product 1, feature A, like that. Okay, you could do that and switch that branch, create this thing. So creates it there, and I can publish this thing. And let's go ahead and just because I want to show you, I'm going to actually create a couple of other branches so you can see, how this helps in a list, or maybe in another application it's shown in a different way. All right, I probably should have just stayed on the release branch because I'm going to create another couple in here. So I'm going to create this, and let's say that I do product 1, feature B, yeah, like that. I'm going to create that, and let's create another one, and let's do this one product 2, feature. Let's just do feature Z. Just have different names for these things. Okay, so I did that. Now I'm going to go ahead and publish these things, get them all up there. May or may not help with what I'm showing you, but I like to finish things off here. So I'm going to publish this one and publish this one, so they're all up on the remote. And you can see in the list already, so it's listing things alphabetically. And if I've got product 1, all my stuff is together. Product 2, all my stuff is together. So if I went back and added another product 1, it would squeeze in there. Now, I have mentioned also before that I will use Visual Studio for some things. And so I'm actually going to open up Visual Studio just because that's what I inherited. If I had been with a different company, I maybe would be using something else. But this is just another way to use the source control. And you can see in here, in this Team Explorer thing, that I already have some repositories, and I'm just going to add this one for this project. I'm going to click this add button. Not that you need to know how to use Visual Studio, just showing that you an example of how you can, I'm going to select branching demo. That's the one I want. How you can use a tool other than what you already have. Now I'm going to double click that one. That's the one that I've selected that's active. You can see branching demo down here. So Visual Studio has these options down here similar to what Flare has. And if I open up the branches in here, you can see all this stuff that I've done that I already had. These branches, these are the local branches all the way down to remotes. And then this is this shows the branches that are up on the remote location. So you can see that because I did product 1/feature A and product 1/feature B, it put them into folders and in here so that I can collapse and expand them. And it does the same thing in the remote location. I find that to be pretty useful for just organizing branches when you got a whole bunch of them. But it's up to you. Maybe if you just have a few branches, that might be overkill. But anyway, there you go. Now, something that I would highly recommend that you do, that I've always done, I just find it helps me and it also helps a team, is to document your processes, your source control processes. I've covered a lot of stuff in this series, things that you can do, some things that you must do, but every team has their own nuances, how they do things, where things are. And so I think it really, really helps to document that. It's a good reminder for you over time because you can't remember everything forever. And it's great for team members, especially new ones coming in. How do we do this? What do we do? So put it down on paper. I have a documentation Bible, and this documentation Bible, it's actually a Flare project. and it has everything. It has our style guide, and it has all of our source control processes, and it has other processes, just various things that we do. So write it out. It really, really will help a team. It helps everybody know what to do and be on the same page. All right, now this section and the next section I'm going to talk about are kind of related, because the next section has to do with hot fixes. And what happened was I wanted to do a hot fix, and that need led me to this section, which you do first, which is creating tags. It just made the process of doing hot fixes easier. And when I say hot fixes, what I'm talking about is you've published something, you've gotten think about the Git flow model. If you've watched that previous video, hopefully you have gotten all the way through the release cycle, and your master branch, if you're using branching, you've published that. So it's the next version of your software, whatever you're publishing. But then after you publish it, somebody, you realize, oh, I desperately need to make a change to that documentation, but you also want to keep your ongoing documentation up to date too. So you do what's called a hot fix and apply it to that. Well, to make the hot fix easier, to know at what point I can create a new branch, because one of the things that you can do with Git is create a new branch based on a commit, not necessarily on another branch, but on a specific commit. And that is the way that I'll do a hot fix. So I'm going to take you through all of this. But the first thing that I need to show you is creating a custom tag. So I'm going to go into Flare. I'm going to show you, actually going to be using a few different things here. I'm going to show you Flare, and I'm going to go into Visual Studio. That's the tool I inherited. It's where I know how to do this. And I'm also going to take you into command line tools, into Git Bash. So let's just kind of get started, and I'll show you what this is. And I actually really, really like this. I depend on this when I do releases. All right, so I'm in my project. I'm on the release branch. So let's say that I've got my release branch. It's all synchronized. It's ready to go for the next release. And if you watch the other videos, you know that what you do at this point is you merge from release into the master branch. So I am going to select my master branch, make it the active one. There it is. And I'm going to select merge branch. And please select a branch to merge into master. Well, I want to merge my release branch in there. And I select OK. And it goes through and it tells me, yep, your merge was a success. Now, normally what I would do at this point is I would just go ahead and finish and sync my files. But if I were to look at the branch history for this master branch, I'm going to open it up here in Flare. So in this little history dialog that you get here, you can see all of the columns in here. And I know that this latest thing that I did, it's all in chronological order, the most recent thing. This is a point where I actually had previously merged from release into my master branch, but I don't really get that much information from it. Like, I don't know if I was going from, version 3 to version 4 to version 5. What is this for? I would maybe have to rely on comment if I put it in there accurately, or the time. And so as you go down, you can see there are other moments where certain branches were they're identified in here. But as much information as you can get from here, one of the things I can't do is I can't create a new branch based on this point in time. And what I want to do is I want more I want to be able to identify, not necessarily just in my comment, but in what's called a tag. And this tag is going to show up in Visual Studio. I'm going to go into that, and you're going to see that it's real easy to spot this thing. So I can just pinpoint what I want. So what I've done here is I've started the merge from release into master. And what I would normally do at this point is I would come down here and I would sync it with my remote, and then I'm done. But I'm going to do this additional step in here where I'm going to create this custom tag. All right. And so first thing I have to tell you is that if you go into File Options, this is something that I talked about early on in this series when I talked about binding, and this thing in here on the source control tab, this get exe, this get for Windows. If you don't have it installed, there will be a link here. You can click it and install it. There is something that you would need, and you might be able to select it when you are when you're installing this get exe, this get for Windows. And I'm going to show you what it is here in a second. Mine's already installed, and I didn't have that. Get exe is installed, but I didn't have that this thing that's associated with it. So what I had to do, and what you might need to do, is actually go into your command prompt and add this thing. So, and this is a one-time thing, right? Now, I didn't have to do this before because I was in a dual bound configuration where I was bound to Git on one of our servers, and then I had a second binding to Central. And so when you have that original binding that's just to Git, that's called origin. But when you are just bound to Central, which I am here just in this project, single bound to Central, that remote is called MadCap Central. So there's this thing that you have to do. So to do it, I'm going to just click in my search bar. And if you start searching for command prompt, it comes up. You right click on this and run as administrator. Now, I've already gone through and done this, but I want to show you. It brings up the prompt, and here's what you type. This is the option. If you are installing Git for Windows, if you see this option, you want to select this, and then you won't have to go through this step of doing this in the command prompt. But you just type git space config space -- global space http.ssl backend space s channel. That's it. Press enter, and you're good. That's the one-time setup. That's to make sure that what I'm going to show you works. And that might seem like a lot, but remember, it's a one-time thing. And to me, it's worth it because I'm getting so much use out of this thing from that point on. Okay, so you got that one-time thing set up. Don't have to worry about that anymore. So what's next? Okay, so I did my initial merge from release into master, but before I push things, what I want to do is open up git bash, or a git command line tool. And I actually already have it here, but I'm going to open it up again just to show you. There's I have it installed, and if you open it up just like this, just launching it, what you need to do is go to the location of your project. And so this is the long way of doing it. I'm going to show you a shortcut. CD C:. So I put mine in the root of the C drive, and mine is called branching-demo. If I had spaces between any of this, I would have to put quotation marks before this C and after the end of it, but I don't have to do that. So press enter, and it goes to that location, and it knows what branch you have checked out. I have master checked out. Okay, so that's the long way of doing it. But if you can go into Windows Explorer, go to the location where your project is. Mine's right here, right click. I actually have a couple of Git command line applications in here. I've Git GUI and Git Bash. I'm going to select Git Bash, and it brings it up, and it just does that step for you that I had in here. Okay, so you get to this point. Now what you do is you type this. You type git space tag, and then whatever you want the name of your tag to be. So for example, let's say that my product's name is FictionSoft and we're doing version 7. I might type it like that, V7. It's just this indicator on the tag that lets me go, oh yeah. When I see that, I go, oh yeah, that is when we released version 7 of FictionSoft. Okay, so I type that in and I press enter. And now what I type is, and of course, this is Git. I just, I'm sure you know that because I'm typing the word Git in here. So whether you can do this with another provider, I don't know. But this is if you're bound to Git or Central, which uses Git. Now, if you're bound to just Git, like you're bound to Git, you're using GitHub or something like that, you would type Git push origin. Origin that's the name of your remote. And then you repeat the name of your tag like this, FictionSoft V7. Okay, but my project, even though it's using Git, it's bound to MadCap Central. So instead of origin, I'm going to type this. I'm going to type MadCap Central, all one word, and then the name of my tag, again, FictionSoft V7. So every release that I do this. I create this tag. All right, and I press enter. And it's just going to take a moment here and run through this and tell me that it's successful. Okay, good. I didn't get any errors in there. Right. Okay, so that is creating a tag. So what do you get out of that? Well, if I were to come back in here and click on branch history, actually, so once I'm done with that, I do want to finish syncing. Okay, so I click on that. You saw a number down there for the pending check-ins, but that was just because it hadn't refreshed yet. So it's going through and it's pushing this up to the remote. So this is what you do after you create that custom tag. It's all done. Now, if I were to go into branch history, I would see something like what I had before, what you saw. So what I like to do, this is one of those occasions where I will actually use Visual Studio. And I don't know what tool you're using, if you're using anything besides Flare, but here's one of the reasons why I like to use Visual Studio for this. I come in here, I have my master branch checked out. This is just the same stuff that you saw in Flare. It's just this is another representation of it. And I'm going to right click on this and select View History. Brings this up and you see my tag, it's in green right there. And you can see I've already done another one, and you can kind of ignore these. I was figuring things out down here, messing around with stuff. So these are all kind of out of order. But in the real world, what's going to happen is you'll see a bunch of stuff like this in between when you do a release. So, it might just go on and on and on for days. Depends on how many commits you have between releases. And I just had a few in here. And then I did a version 6 release, and I did a few more, and there's my version 7 release. So you can just imagine if I have a whole bunch of stuff in here and it scrolls and scrolls and scrolls and scrolls and scrolls, and I want to know, oh, when was it that we released version 7? Because after this point, I'm going to be doing a whole lot more stuff for version 8. And if I have to scroll down and I need to do something for that commit, I don't have to go, oh, wait, it was, what time was it? And we did what? It just pops this green. So I just wanted to include that as a tip because I find it useful. Now, I've shown you how to create the actual custom tag. And now in the next section, we're going to talk about hot fixes, and I'll show you how this is useful. All right, so hot fixes. If you haven't watched if you skipped over the previous section, go back and watch it, the one on creating custom tags, because I'm going to talk about it in this section. So hot fix. So here's what happens. Let's say you've seen my project here. Let's say that I just released, published version 7 of this documentation. And I start working right away on version 8. I've got other branches and I'm working away. And then I find out that there was something that really should have gone into some documentation that should have gone into version 7. And I got to fix it. And I also want it to be part of what's coming next, version 8, all that stuff. So I do what's called a hot fix. And as I mentioned before, the way that you do this is you create a new branch on a specific commit, that commit that represents when you published. And that's why that custom tag was important. Unfortunately, I can't do that from the Flare interface. I mentioned, back at the beginning of this series, you have different products, different tools that you can use for source control. And the GUI tools like Flare, like some of these others, they're only going to give you so many options, but you can get all the options by going into command line tool. Well, the tool that our company uses for a lot of things is Visual Studio. So I have access to that in addition to Flare, and I can do this from Visual Studio. So I'm going to take you in, just show you how I do it. So in the previous section, I showed you how I brought up the history, and there's my custom tag for FictionSoft version 7. I go, oh, that is the point where we release this thing. And so what I do is I right click on this and I select new branch. Okay. And my new branch is going to be based, you can see this is how Visual Studio does it. My new branch is based on this commit. It's that number that's right there. Normally it would say you're creating a new branch based on one of your existing branches, but I'm creating it based on this. So I probably would give the branch a name. I would put it, whatever my product name is, but in this case, I'm just going to say, I'm not going to start out with that. I'm just going to say hot fix, and then whatever missing content, something like that. I might, whatever it is that I forgot to put in there, I might be more specific so I can identify, oh, that's what this thing is for, this branch, this what its purpose is. So I'm going to click create branch. So I'm creating this in Visual Studio instead of creating it in Flare. And then this is the way, so you see your remote branches down here. Okay, so I got my new branch right here. So now I can go back into Flare and I can refresh my branches in here. And there is my new one. It's not published yet. And I can just click this to publish it so that it gets up to the remote. So again, I've already continued on with my other documentation. So this is based on the master, that commit in the master branch, that specific point in time. And what I'm going to do is go in and fix whatever I need to fix. Let's say it was down here, topic G, and I'm just going to go in here and say this really important thing I forgot. All right, whatever it is, it could be, you're just making a fix in one topic or any other files, multiple files, whatever it is that you need to get straight. So I am going to save this thing now, and I'll do my commit, and I'll say, fixed missing content, whatever I want to say. Going to do that. I'm going to commit it. And I am going to sync it to the remote. So there's my fix. It's done. So what do I do after this? Okay, it's almost done. There. So it's pushed up there. So the fix is good. And now I just need to make sure that my other branches are up to date with this information. So what branches need to get updated? Well, I need to merge this into my master branch and I'll merge it also into my release branch. I'm not going to go through all those steps because you've seen me do this before, how I merge things. So I might merge it just straight into the release branch and sync that. And then when I merge it into my master branch, I might do another custom tag. So I would see not only, okay, this is where version 7 was released, but this is where my version 7 hotfix happened. Okay, so that is what you would do, or at least what I do for hotfixes using custom tags. So this final thing is really just a reiteration to tell you not to be afraid to use other tools if you need to. Of course, I'm going to use Flare when I can, but sometimes you might have to use one of these other things, and you've just seen examples of me doing it. I'll give you another example. A couple of years ago, I was doing some work, and I was actually using Visual Studio then, and I was just I had done some commits, and I was trying to push these commits up to the remote. And what happened was I got this big auto-generated, system-generated message where it wouldn't do it. And you know how system-generated messages are. It was like they just took a whole bunch of random words from the dictionary, put them in there. It might as well have just said, you figure it out. I'm going back to bed. That's how much help it was. And I had to look at this and go, why won't this work? I just did 10 pushes and this one won't work. Why won't this one work? And I had to look at what I was doing, and what I did over the last hour or two, whatever it was. I had added a whole bunch of images, and the images are usually going to be the files that have the largest size in your Flare project. And I had just added a bunch of them. And what happened was I told Visual Studio, push. And it said, no, not today, man. I'm not doing this. If I had a lot fewer images, it would have worked. But because it just past this certain point, it just goes, no, not today. So what I did was I went into Git Bash, into the command line tool, and I did it from there. I went to the location of my project, typed git space push, and it worked. So sometimes, especially with a GUI application, you're not going to be able to do what you can do in a command line tool. So don't be afraid to do that if you have a need for something that you can't get from another tool. So as you can see, there are lots of things that you can do in addition to just the main source control stuff that can help you out. And there's more, I'm sure. You probably, as you are working through source control, you and your team, you're going to come across things where you say, oh, this is useful. This is a great tip. And what I would encourage you to do, again, is document this. Write down the things that are really useful or things to avoid, so on and so on. So source control, this is a big subject. It's a huge, huge deal. And I just hope that you have, started out at the first video in this series, you worked your way through, and I hope that by now you feel a lot better about using source control, that you know what to do, what to avoid, and you have a plan going forward, and you're just in good shape to really take advantage of it, because source control, as frustrating as it can be at times, it really, really is awesome. It can be awesome and very, very necessary. So I rhymed. Okay. Thank you for watching this video and this video series. We'll talk to you next time.